rich background in AI, driving strategic growth and innovation, and roles at firms such as Deloitte, AT&T, First Data, and Piedmont Bank. Frank brings a wealth of insights and is also an accomplished author. And I feel like I could go on, but I'm very excited to get the conversation going and to have you here. So without further ado, we can jump into it.
Thanks for having me. Really excited. So
definitely, thank you for carving out time in your busy schedule for us today. So the topic of conversation today is really just an introduction to artificial intelligence in finance and what that looks like, mainly from an application perspective. I think more people filing it. And so at a very high level, I think it'd be helpful, Frank, if you want to take your stab. I know it's a massive sort of domain, but what would you sort of describe AI as in the current domain and its applications in its present state?
Andrew, it's a great question, and that's a question that comes up a lot when we think about AI. Part of it, in my opinion, is that I think the hype in the news far exceeds its capabilities sometimes. I think we get really excited about all the possibilities of what AI can do. And that's not to diminish that some of these things aren't being worked on or they're not coming. The reality is what we could do today with the AI is far limited to versus what people talk about it in the news, right? There is no magical button that you can press to where you can build the best financial plan for an individual. There's none of those things, but you can use AI to start doing analysis, working on proposals, working on marketing pieces, building yourself up as a thought leader. Particularly in this space, one of the things that we've talked about for years, decades, is all of the financial education and financial awareness and those things. AI can absolutely help in those areas because it really is solely focused on the generation side of AI today. You kind of see it on an individual investment side. E-Trade's out there and they have an automated email investor. Wouldn't call it AI, but it is AI in some instances. It's using data, it's making a decision, but that's only going to improve over time. But I think for the most part right now, you got to think of it more of a sales and marketing type application. And then it'll eventually start leaching into what we do on a day-to-day basis in terms of improving our ability to make investments, our ability to improve investments for our clients, gain new business, all of those other things.
Yeah, no, it's a great point that you make. I think a lot of people perceive AI to be generative AI, and that obviously is not the case. I mean, there are a tremendous amount of other models and architectures and applications and way of performing machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so with that in mind, to your point, you have this generative component, which is truly incredible, and you can do a lot of very impressive things with that. But for some of the more nuanced applications in terms of predictive analytics and forecasting and things of that nature, there is no button, to your point, where you can simply press and it will and it'll sort of build that. I think that there requires a much higher degree of interacting with the fundamental components of the model itself.
Yeah, and what you're going to find is that the big institutions, so think of like a Chase or a Merrill Lynch, they're going to invest heavily in terms of trying to integrate AI into some of their tools faster. To really, because to them it's more of a volume thing, right? It's how do we take care of tens of thousands of accounts or people or individuals. AI is going to help create those efficiencies, and they have the money for the investment. But for individual investors, people that are running their own practices or work with smaller firms, you don't have tens of millions of dollars to invest in technology. So you're going to be more reliant on finding stuff that comes off the shelf at some point. So I think that it's an unfortunate thing. The ones that have the money now can get the jump start in doing custom solutions. For the folks that are looking for more of the off-the-shelf type solution or subscription or something along those lines, it's going to be a little bit further down the road before they're going to be able to kind of find those tools to really kind of help them.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that we at QuaIL Technologies are really focused on is building that button to where you can sort of press it and you'll get your full plan and everything comes out nice and clean.
Right, and it's great that you guys are thinking about that, right? So you're thinking about that mid-market, lower market in terms of size. you can make the investment and then offer those tools down. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of innovation. I
Mhm.
think, my opinion is, I think we think of AI as this cusp of, oh my God, we made this great leap in innovation and all this stuff. I don't even think that's it. I think that is literally the start of the explosion. I think the innovation explosion is going to happen to where companies like QuaIL and any other firm out there that's going to harness that explosion and then turn it into something bigger. You see it in the architectural and engineering space. You're going to see it in the financial services space. People are really going to come in with some really innovative solutions that are going to really transform how we do business on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And so what of those phases do you think that we're currently in? It sounds like the marketing component is definitely there where it can
Mm-hmm.
be leveraged to improve visibility for an organization and a practice and really sort of build the business from a customer base perspective.
Yeah. So, going back to where you went to school, Harvard Business School did this study to where they were looking at a large consulting firm, and they split their staff 50-50. 50% of the people were going to use AI for basic administrative stuff, not even client deliverables or anything, just like managing emails, calendars, all this other stuff. And then the other 50% are going to do business as usual, no AI. What they found is that 47% increase in productivity on the people that were using AI. And we're not even talking about developing client deliverables. We're really just talking about managing your calendar, responding to emails, writing letters, doing just your basic things. You're seeing a 47% increase in productivity. So it was really taking low performers and turning them into high performers. So you can have someone that sits at a scale of 1 to 5, sitting at a 2 or 3 on the low end scale, actually performing like a 4 or 5 star employee. So what you're going to find is like right now, the AI can really help you just become more efficient at the things that you do. And if I look at myself, let's do a real world example. I write all my own social media content. I can do that on a weekend now using AI, doing a variety of things. And I've really established myself as a thought leader in my space, mainly because I can post twice a day now. If I was doing it without AI, it's always like, well, I'm going to forget. And then I'd have gaps and it'd be 2-3 days and I don't get to it and I get busy. Now I can create a whole month's worth of content on a Saturday or Sunday morning before my second cup of coffee. And, that just makes me more productive. It established me as a thought leader, and I can really get into the marketplace. That's how you need to be thinking about AI right now. That's how you can really harness its capabilities. The next phase of this, going back to your question, is then we're going to start getting into the back office aspect. So you think about, in your instance, you're billing clients. Would it be kind of cool to find out, whether or not a client's going to pay on time or not pay on time? Get you out of the administrative aspects of managing your client billables or emails or any of those things. So it's going to impact the back office, whether that's your ERP, whether it's your CRM, whether it's Hootsuite or HubSpot or whatever it is that's sitting on the back end of that. That's where you're going to see the next iteration of this. And then finally, it's going to kind of get into what we would do at the end of the day as professional client service professionals. Then it's really going to start feeding into our client deliverables, right? You being able to deliver a customized investment plan based on a whole bunch of data about me, not just some generic profile of me, but literally me, and then be able to do all that for your clients in seconds. And you don't have, so you can get to the customization without actually having to do all the customization. AI is really going to help you get there. So I look at it in 3 phases. Now, the timing of that's going to be interesting. Could happen in 3 months, could happen in 6 months, could happen next year. It will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think I saw the HBS study, and, and to your point, it really is just a matter of time because when you take that into consideration and you think, I think it was Gartner did a study as well,
Yep.
and they essentially projected that 90% of analytical processes will be replaced in the next
Oh,
3 years. 3,
yeah.
and then
So yeah, I
and
mean, just
you've
think about
got
that.
yeah. So you've got that. I mean, 90%, and then you have, I think it was 57% of forecasting tasks are going to be replaced or automated by AI in that time frame. And then when you also take into consideration that workers that are using it are going to be
Yeah.
47% more productive, it's almost inevitable that AI will be integrated into every business process in some way, shape, or form.
Every business process. And if you wanted to peel back the onion, the layers of the onion, the thing where AI really, really shines is in taking structured data and then finding patterns. So you think about financial data and you look at historicals and you can keep plugging in a bunch of data and then have AI immediately kind of spit back to you a prediction. That's going to be pretty powerful, right? Where you can take 5 years, 10 years of data, and something that would take somebody like you or me days or weeks just to kind of continue to mull over and kind of figure out what the trend is. It will spot all the things that are outliers, all the things that are actually the trending lines. So yeah, being able to kind of do the analysis and be faster. So if you're managing 20, 30 clients, instead of having to manage each individual client separately and do an analysis and spend time to produce a report, you can do that same activity in a fraction of the time, because AI is going to enable you to get to the data faster, clean it up, get a summary, and then you can put your expertise as a human being and look at it and then make the final determination on and get it to your clients faster. Yeah, it's going to be an absolute game changer for a lot of people. Now, I do worry about people in industries like attorneys, and you look at underwriters, things where they're looking at contracts and they're looking at risk. AI is either going to eliminate some of those roles, meaning like I've taken contracts that people have given me and I've run them through AI, help me point out something weird or what's out of line with this contract. I don't need to pay an attorney $300 an hour to do that anymore. Like, so how do they evolve and how do we evolve? So you think about contracts, you think about risk and underwriting, a lot of that is ultimately going to change with AI.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely want to come back to the sort of risks and legal and compliance challenges later on. But you touched on something there, and I think one of the points of focus, whether we're talking about increasing visibility for your business, increasing the value of the business, you know, putting together content, structuring content, and doing that on a regular frequency, building financial plans and investment portfolios, and being able to, take all of this data and put it into a structure that is usable. At the end of the day, it comes down to productivity. And so using AI to increase productivity in all of these different areas, I think is going to be incredibly impactful. Obviously, if you have you take a financial advisor, a wealth manager, investment manager, if you are increasing their productivity, typically leads to better investment outcomes, better risk management, better communication, and much more. So I think the potential for it is incredible. I think it really comes down to, okay, well, here's what we have. How do we use what we have and build upon that to ultimately get to the vision that we're trying to realize? And so, with that said, I mean, what are some ways that you're seeing individuals within the financial space leverage AI for those tasks that increase productivity?
Yeah, so we always have these tasks throughout the day that, like, we know that we need to do them, but we just never either kind of find the time to do it, or in some instances we kind of half-ass it a little bit, where we don't put as much energy behind something. And whether that is just a weekly client communication, whether that is putting something out on social media or your website to kind of position you as that thought leader because you want to kind of continue to generate new business, we tend to take those activities while they're important. We don't. They're always the first thing to give up when something else happens. Like, oh, I got a client meeting. I have to do something else. So when you think about AI, and the way I look at this is that you could sit there and say, I could still do all of those things and still then be able to put more of my focus on the things that are actually going to generate me revenue. Right. So whether it's working on the client information, working, actually meeting with the client, you got to figure out, like, we only have a finite number of hours in a particular day. And how do we try to squeeze more and more into that? So in some ways, it could be a lifestyle thing too, where, work-life balance. I know it's kind of hard when you have, 8-type personalities where they're constantly on that drive. But, if you could free up and sit there and say, I don't have to do something at night now because I can do it during the day because AI has enabled me that. What else could I be focused on? Whether it is doing something where it's a life-work balance, or it's getting me to focus on something that is actually closer to the revenue generating pipeline. AI is really going to be able to help enable that. And I see that in myself and the things that I do on a day-to-day basis, that it's really done. I probably save 20 to 30%. I'm not at the 47% like the HBS study, but I do find myself about a 20 to 30% increase in productivity based on my outputs. I see tangible outputs, and I'm like, yes, I could do this, right? This is honestly, this is my third podcast webinar this week. So it's like, I'm able to squeeze these things in now because I can free up my day.
Yeah. And as you're having these conversations with people throughout the industry, I mean, what typically, or what is coming into the conversation most often?
I think part of it, and this is a generalized spirit, and it doesn't matter what industry I'm talking about, whether I'm talking to creatives at some art school, whether I'm talking to architects, or whether I'm talking to financial advisors, everyone has the same concern. Is AI going to eliminate my job? Right? And you think about it, if I'm a financial analyst and AI can do 90% of what I do, am I still needed? The answer to that question, the simple answer to the question is absolutely. There always needs to be a human component to this. Someone has to look at it. Someone has to evaluate it. More importantly, you need to be the person that's doing the inputting. So like it's AI is a great tool, and it'll always be a great tool, and it's going to get better. But at the end of the day, there has to be that human interaction on the front end, and there has to be that refinement review on the back end. That middle part, yeah, that's going to make your job easier. So then the question becomes, could you do more, and what else could you be focused on that's really going to kind of generate your revenue? But it doesn't matter the industry. It doesn't matter whether or not you're just starting your career or you're coming to the end of your career. You're concerned that AI is going to steal your job.
Yeah. And you also touched on something there in terms of being, having to have the human as the thing that is inputting the data into the model and ultimately deriving the value from it. Something that we're focused on pretty acutely at the moment is the integrations. And so having the ability to, going back to simply pressing the button, where you can press the button and all of your data is already available, that it can be accessed, it can be updated, it can be expanded and improved, but making it as seamless as possible from the user's perspective. And so going back to the productivity thing, I think that is just one more thing as AI continues to evolve and the systems that are built around it are built with an understanding that it can become so much more powerful if you have this AI component to it. I imagine a scenario where all of these systems are connected and talking to each other. And to your point, you sort of have the human component that is sort of the manager of the assembly line, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So think about that. That's actually Microsoft's model. What you just described is Microsoft's model. Microsoft wants to put AI everywhere you are where you're working. If you're on Windows 11, it's built into the operating system. If you open up the web browser, it's in the web browser. If you're cruising the web, it's there. If you open up Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, it's going to be right there. That's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be everywhere in everything at some point. Some folks are going to get there a lot faster. So, I'm assuming most of us are on Windows machines because that's the vast majority of the computers that are sold. It is going to be integrated into everything. By the way, I think Microsoft even announced that they're going to put, they're reconfiguring the keyboards. There's going to be an AI button now on the keyboard. So not only is it in the software, it's also going to be in the hardware. It's going to be in your phones. It's going to be in your cars. So from this perspective, you think about it, even if you didn't get any specialized financial services or financial advisor application that had AI in it, just opening your computer, you're going to have AI. So you can immediately start using it in Outlook and managing your emails and your calendar. Outlook, if you're on it, it's interesting. It's if Andrew, you sent me an email and there was an action item in there, it starts prompting me to say, hey, Andrew asked you to follow up. Do you want to set a task? Or do you want to set a meeting? So you're starting to see that now, to where it's helping me simplify my day by just pointing out the things when someone sends me an email. So you think about this, you're getting emails from your clients, you're getting emails and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden your task list, AI is now filling your task list with all these follow-ups that you don't, one, have to create yourself, two, have to remind you that it's happening. That's just a simple, it's having like a virtual administrative assistant to help you just organize your day. So yeah, it's going to be everywhere. And I think that's the fundamental thing that I think where most people are going to see it initially. And then it's going to, all these other financial apps, the planning apps, and the tools that we use that are specialized, they will eventually have some kind of AI component to it.
Yeah. And to your point, I think as investment managers, wealth advisors, financial advisors, part of the job is managing the investments and part of the job is managing the clients. And that's the administrative component that you're talking about. So you'll see exponential growth on both sides of the business there, where AI can have a massive impact. But I'm
Yeah.
curious
Oh,
as you talk
absolutely.
about I'm curious as you talk about the different ways that AI is sort of creeping into not only the software and the hardware. At what point do the considerations around not only sort of legal and compliance, but just privacy concerns? Is
Mhm.
that something that you've found has come up in the conversations that you're having?
As a people, we've given up on privacy in a lot of ways when we think about our activities on social media, right? The Facebooks of the world are not free for because they're generous. They're stealing all of our data and they're monetizing it, right? They're using it for advertising purposes, and it's interesting on how we kind of give those things up. And if you have an Alexa in your house, or if you have a Google device, or even Siri on your phone, it's like we interact with these tools and these systems for the most part that they're really kind of AI. We just haven't called them AI, but those are really just AI assistants. And we've done it for years. And I think so when we start thinking about the privacy pieces, I think as humans, we have a tendency to lean towards convenience. Like, oh, this is convenient so that like I don't think about these other components. But I think you bring up a really good question. It's like, at what point do the asylum the people in the asylum start managing the asylum, right? So it's like, well, we have to be thinking about that. Now what you are seeing is that there are some players in this space, particularly Apple. I know Anthropic, which is they do a chat GPT competitor called Claude. They have taken privacy to a new level to where they're focused on encryption. They're focused on containerizing your information to you to a point. I think Europe is very progressive with their updated requirements around cookies and all this other stuff. So I think we're starting to take it seriously. My only concern in all this is, have we let the genie out of the bottle, and is it possible to kind of grab it and put it back in? I don't know. I think we can continue to put boundaries around this. It's going to take some yeoman's effort to kind of really kind of change people's attitudes towards that, particularly big businesses, because it's big money. Google's not the size. Google is not Google if it didn't have all that data, right? That's their whole business. It's not. They're not a search engine. They're not even an advertiser. They're basically a data company, and they have basically figured out a way to monetize the heck out of it. And every other company is basically followed that same model.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And I think you'd mentioned it earlier, in terms of the ability for AI to take this unstructured data that has been collected by a lot of these companies and make it actionable by effectively turning it into structured data that you can then filter in and continue to build and improve the models.
I mean, kind of scary in a way too, because I think the power of the AI, because we always think about, okay, let's, as salespeople, we're always kind of focused on let's build our ideal customer profile. Let's go build it and grab demographics. Now what they're doing is they're taking that basic information, household income, gender, location, all this other stuff, and now they're coupling it with all of your web history and search data and what you buy and where you shop and all this other stuff. And they're creating these scary, psychological profiles on people, and they understand human behavior in a way that I think most humans can't comprehend, which is like really weird because you and I could be talking about something, and next thing you know, you're getting ads, and you're like, well, how the hell that happened, right? That's where I just think that amplifies because AI becomes smarter, and in some ways, it has become self-learning, so it teaches itself to continually improve itself. So it's going to get to the point to where it's going to be pretty scary from an advertising perspective, because you're going to be able to get messages and things in front of you that are very, very customized and very, very specific to you, without you ever even telling anyone about that. And that's so it's an interest. It's very cool, but it's also kind of scary in the sense that we've kind of given up on some of the privacy aspects.
Yeah. So scary from an advertising perspective, but as you hinted at earlier, from a financial planning perspective, incredibly beneficial, I think, where you have,
Absolutely.
to your point, the ability to build a profile around somebody as an individual And this is where the behavioral finance and behavioral economics components come into play, because everybody has a different risk profile given their financial situation or just their sort of propensity for a loss.
Right.
10% loss to one person could mean something else to somebody else.
Right. And so, but you can even nuance it down to, getting down into to even just tenths of a percentage. A 9% loss for me is acceptable, but a 10% loss is not. Right. So what we try to do is we try to bucketize people as much as possible. Right. So, but if you take someone that's living in this in the same zip code, has similar household income and a bunch of other stuff, without even talking to that person, you and I could look very differently if you got to know us a little bit better. I could be divorced and have alimony payments and a whole other set of family, and you may be single with the same household. There's all these things. So when you start thinking what AI can do is then it can start taking all of that data for you, and then start building a very, very unique profile on an individual. So we love this concept of one-to-one. I want to create a one-to-one campaign, a one-to-one program for all of my clients, and I'm going to do that. The reality is we don't. What we do is we have a series of buckets, whether it's based on age, whether it's based on income, or some other profile, and then we try to fit everybody in these buckets. I think what you're going to find is those buckets go away, and then you're going to have these really kind of individualized solutions for your clients. And it's honestly not going to take you much effort to kind of get there. The tools, the AI is really going to help you kind of drive that piece home.
Yeah. And I think that's true whether we're talking about sort of risk assessment, whether we're doing, research and prospecting. I mean, how you reach out and sort of engage with one client could be totally different with how you reach out, and the words that you use, the language you use to communicate could significantly impact the, potential of bringing that client on board.
Oh, absolutely. And right. So now you're even getting down to customized sales pitches, customized presentations, all these customized portfolio type things that would resonate with someone like me, because I don't want to be treated like bucket A. I want to be treated like it's me. I have unique circumstances, unique needs. What could you do to help solve those problems?
Mm-hmm.
And AI can really kind of help you navigate that.
Yeah, not only at the onset, but on an ongoing basis. I mean, AI doesn't need to sleep. It doesn't need to, go.
It works 24. It works 24/7, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now, not only do you have an understanding and sort of peace of mind at the onset that you're set up for success, but you have the continued peace of mind knowing that the AI is monitoring your portfolio and your investments 24/7. It's responding to any changes in the markets. It has the ability to ingest thousands of news articles and understand what, at the most intricate level, the impacts in, the geopolitical risks to the market risks to macro, and how that trickles down and impacts each individual portfolio, and not simply this is how it's going to impact the equity market or this is how it's going to impact interest rates, but specifically what it's going to do to an individual portfolio, what that means from a return perspective, and ultimately whether or not an individual is able to realize their financial objectives.
Yeah. I mean, also you start thinking about just the predictive nature of this, being able to run scenarios and say, if the Fed doesn't reduce rates this year, which, there's some rumors now saying that they may not, or if it's going to be, probably late third quarter, maybe fourth quarter before they even consider that. What does that do? And so being able to use AI to run scenarios, like if there's a quarter point reduction in the fourth quarter, potentially what could happen if they move it up and it's in the third quarter, or say they don't do anything. Like, you could do your own scenario planning now, just by taking all the different data inputs that are out there and not have to rely on third-party analysts or particularly if you're smaller and you don't have access to those things. I think it's gonna be pretty powerful. But I also, when you start thinking about the automatic investment thing, and you can kind of see E-Trade kind of doing it with their platform too. It's just, it's the automated investment portfolio. Now it optimizes only quarterly, but I anticipate that it's going to get to the point to where it starts acting like a human, to where maybe it starts optimizing monthly or starts getting into biweekly. So you start thinking about just the opportunities to continue to fine tune your customer, your clients' portfolios on a more nuanced basis. I think those tools are going to make most investor financial advisors really a powerful tool for people like me to kind of connect with. and not want to do my own investing and actually have someone that knows what they're doing to kind of focus on that piece.
Yeah. And with that said, I mean, do you think people, and I asked this question at an event at CMU the other day, but what does that look like in terms of adoption? I mean, will people trust AI managing their investments? I mean, you have robo advisors right now,
Yeah.
but people will allocate a percentage of their portfolio to that, or will they be happy with it sort of just having full control? I think to your point, you will
Yeah.
always need that human component. I think the best solutions are going to come from a symbiotic relationship between man and machine.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the way you position yourself on that is that, it's technology that enables the investor to be a better investor.
Hmm.
If I'm a client, I'm more inclined to know that my financial advisor is using technology, but always has the final say or look at it before it's executed. So there's always that gut check. So there's always going to be that human component. And I feel more confident on the AI side if there was the human component to it, because I think that's a powerful way. Hey, listen, I can use all this technology to get better insights, better visibility, make better recommendations. I'm going to review it and then present you with the best options. I'm really comfortable with that. Because one, I know that you're going to be on it. You can make decisions faster. You can do all these things faster by using the technology, but you're giving me the confidence that you're going to kind of double check it to make sure that before we execute on this is how it should play out. I think for the most common generic retail investor, I think those automated solutions are good where they necessarily can't afford paying the investment fees or paying an investor to do it. Small portfolios, say sub 20,000, sub 50,000. Yeah, I think AI is going to really help them be better investors and maybe allow them to kind of grow some net worth and some equity and wealth. But someone who has a portfolio that's 100,000, 500,000, a million or more, they're going to want a hybrid of both the technology and also the human touch.
Exactly.
That's just my opinion on that. But I think it's a pretty solid one when you kind of think about it, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And you touch on something pretty interesting there in terms of how does the end investor feel about the person managing their investments, and do they feel that they're using the latest and greatest technology? Do they feel like they are using all of the resources at their disposal? And I think with an understanding of the capabilities of AI, to have the question really, would you rather have a financial advisor manage your investments with AI or without? I think is ultimately what the question will be.
I think, and this is an interesting because, having, working at a bank right now, it's a smaller community bank. But what you find is that the vast majority of people don't know their banker's name, right? Their money is typically with someone they don't know, right? It even gets worse, or it gets amplified when you start thinking about investments, because this is kind of like my savings. This is kind of going into the future. I think that the personalized touch and knowing who your banker is and someone who knows you is going to be important, because it's a big thing for most people. I think there's always going to be this smaller segment of people that don't want to interact with the financial bank because they don't see the value in it for whatever reason. But those aren't the ones we're targeting anyway. So I think there's always going to be that balance between the people that don't like their people and they want the technology, and then there's other people that I don't want the technology, I only want the people. But that leaves that big center bell curve piece of it right in the middle, that I think the blending of the technology and the humans is really going to benefit both, not only the client and the customer, but also the investor.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I imagine that there will be a number of options available for people across the spectrum that want, purely human, maximizing AI versus, totally autonomous on the AI side. So interesting to see how it
my
plays out.
kids have investment accounts. They're completely automated. They're 21. They don't probably need to talk to a financial advisor. They haven't even started working yet. But get into their late 20s, early 30s. They're buying a house. They're making more money. They're doing investments. I can see them transitioning over time. So you think about the life cycle of a customer. They could start off on that whole self-service on the AI side, but once their portfolio hits a certain size, then you start moving into kind of more the hybrid and the personalization, which I think is great. So if you're able to it offer both of those solutions where you're starting people off on the lower end, the more automated piece where they're just kind of self-managing to when they get to a certain point and then start coming into more of a hybrid model. That may be an interesting sales funnel pipeline for some investors, some firms to be thinking about, is get people investing early using AI. It's a low cost investment for both the client and the firm. But once the portfolio hits a certain size, then the goal is to kind of transition them over to kind of more the hybrid model. That may be actually a pretty good way when you start thinking about your pipeline. I don't think it's a all or nothing. I think that there's probably some middle ground in most of that. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity there to kind of really rethink your business in terms of how you can incorporate it fully and also kind of do that hybrid type human versus computer type stuff.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I know we could go on and on. I want to save some time for some Q&A. If anyone has any questions, if you are dialed in, you can into Teams. You can click the Q&A button on the top navigation bar, and from there you will click the little message icon, and you'll see a drop-down menu that says "Ask a Question." So I just open up the floor if anybody has any questions that they would like us to touch on or address, or even add your own thoughts. I think it'd be super interesting to hear what people think. And while those are coming in, Frank, I mean, let me get your perspective on what you think is the most exciting part about AI sort of currently, and then how you see that progressing over the next couple of years.
It's interesting. It's more on the creative side. Some of the when you start thinking about like financial wellness and content, I like this whole concept of text to video. Being able to kind of type something and then create a short form video. Like being able to get your thoughts out around why it's important to create a savings account. Why is it important to start a retirement plan? But be able then and have it animated and then put it on your website. I think people like that. They like instantly consumable type stuff. Like, it's why TikTok's so popular and why, all those short videos that come out. People just love to be able to watch something for 15 seconds and get educated and also share it. Like, oh yeah, this really resonated with me. I'm going to send this to Andrew. So, instantly consumable and easily shareable is where I really kind of see the creative side of this. And the cool part of that is you don't even need to be a video person. You don't even need to be a creative person. You just need to have the idea, and then you type it, and then AI kind of creates it for you. So, if you're struggling with, I don't have the resources, the time, or the creativity to kind of create financial wellness content, whether it's short form videos or any of the other things, I'm really excited about the fact that it's going to enable people that don't necessarily have the competency to create creative stuff, the ability to create creative stuff. So I see this explosion of people that tend to be spreadsheet nerds being able to kind of take that knowledge and that institutional stuff that they have and turn it into educational stuff to either educate their customers, build their thought leadership, all of those things, and it's going to make it easy. So I'm really excited about that aspect.
Definitely. And one question that's come in offline, I think hinting at we had hinted at the legal and compliance perspective, but didn't dig into it too much. But what are some of the considerations from an L&C perspective that people should be thinking about as it pertains to AI for financial services?
So when you think about that, right? So as regulations change, as tax codes change, as all these things change, you're always trying to compare it to the previous version of something. So I anticipate what you're going to find is that to get into compliance or understand the new compliance regs and all those things that come out, using AI to kind of compare the new reg to the old reg, and help you modify content or identify areas that you need to change, whether it's your call script. I know that like everything that I do from a marketing perspective, every message has to go through compliance review. All of that code base, that regulation base is going to sit in their database somewhere to where you're going to be able to simplify your review process and make sure that, one, you're in compliance with any regs or regulations or changes that happen year to year. And we all know that, every time they change something from a retirement plan perspective, an investment perspective, perspective, FDIC or whatever the heck it is, it's always hard to understand what needs to change and what not. Like what are the rules? So I find that from that perspective, you're really good. I think it's going to allow the individual investor, individual advisor to be able to be a little bit more productive when it kind of understands when those things change. Really start getting into the privacy side. That's a whole nother interesting thing. What you're going to find is I think that the financially oriented tools are going to kind of have those compliance pieces kind of already built into it. So all the what's the IPPA, the personalized identifiable data. I think all of those systems are going to kind of have those compliance checks in there to where you're going to be able to use it without actually exposing or putting risk around exposing client data, non-shareable information, social security numbers, etc. So I think those compliance-oriented tools or the financial-oriented tools are going to be there. The risk is that I wouldn't use an off-the-shelf ChatGPT for that stuff. You'd be very mindful of how you're using personally identifiable information when you're doing analysis in an open-ended tool. I think that kind of, I'm not sure if it does expose it, but I do think that it increases your risk exponentially if you're doing that. So just be very mindful about what you're putting and using in the tools. And then also kind of make sure you're reading the terms of services. Make sure that I do know, like on Microsoft Copilot, if you're using it within your entity, your Office 365 entity, they kind of keep everything within containerized. So whether it's HIPAA, whether it's personal identifiable information, it kind of contains it. But just be very mindful of the open tools versus the tools that do that. Make sure you understand how they're using the data and where it's being used and how it's being stored, so you don't put yourself at additional risk.
Definitely. And there's another question on that topic. And I sort of addressed a question, I think, from a different perspective in terms of how does one incorporate AI in a compliant manner. And I think to your point, it really comes down to what is the AI resource that you're leveraging. And so, I would, to your point, I would say be very cognizant of that when deciding ultimately which AI company you're going to work with, because especially within financial services, you need to make sure, especially as a financial advisor, that every recommendation you're making is backed by data, is backed by evidence, and you are able to reference that should there ever be an audit or an inquiry from a regulator. So, one of the things that I think is missing from a lot of the providers out there is the ability to sort of track what data is going into the model, how it's being analyzed, what is the logic, if you will, that the AI is taking if they're making recommendations or client communications, and being able to reference that data, the timestamp, the provenance, really. I think those are all super important things. And sort of along the lines of another question that's come across is, how does one leverage AI with an understanding that all of the sort of emails and personal information associated with a particular investment account, when that information is being transmitted throughout a network or across networks, how do you get around the need to encrypt that data? But I think you sort of hit it on the head where, we need to be cognizant of what we're putting in there in the first place. And there are different techniques that can be leveraged. I know you'd mentioned Microsoft, but they're one, but there are many others that have processes in place to de-identify information, but still be able to generate value from the output and then incorporate that information back downstream.
Yeah, so I think that using AI is going to be kind of no different than using any digital tool that you're using today. So if you're using portals and all this other stuff, the fundamental cybersecurity structure of that, it shouldn't change. AI doesn't add any additional new component to it. The new component is depending on the tool. Again, going back to what you said about where you're using the tool. I want to kind of touch on something, and I think the trend for this, and you're starting to see this now, is this whole concept of private AI or private ChatGPT, to where it's your ChatGPT, your data, it sits in your container within your network, and it doesn't feed the broader model. It's only kind of used for you. I see that trend actually accelerating, because whether it's financial services or whether it's healthcare or whether it's construction, engineering, and architecture, Nobody wants their data out there. They're like, it's like, it may not even have personally identifiable data information in it, but they still don't want it out there. So I think the concept of private AI is something that's really going to take off over the next year. And you're starting to see that, like, if the way Microsoft is approaching this is that the Copilot sits on the Azure cloud and it's just you. It uses the technology, i.e. helps you process the AI on your data, but it's your data. It doesn't leave your data, it doesn't leave your entity, all those other things. So I think you look at that, Microsoft is going to be a game-changing thing for a lot of organizations because they're going to feel more confident with that. But that doesn't mean AWS isn't going to do it. That doesn't mean that Google is not going to do it. That doesn't mean that IBM is not already doing it, right? All of those entities are, IBM has been out there with their commercials. They always talk about their private AI. Now, it's pretty expensive for most people to kind of go out there, but, as with anything, it costs a lot of money when it's new. A year from now, the costs are going to come down. You get this thing down to $1,000 or $5,000 a month, to kind of run a private AI. I think most firms will be like, yep, for the security and the safety and my data is secure, I'm happy to pay that. They're not willing to pay the hundreds of thousands of dollars now to do a custom solution. But as soon as it becomes commercialized, I think it's going to really explode, because I think most organizations, regardless of the industry, want their information secure and safe.
Yep. And let's see, I've got a minute left here. We have a couple more questions that I don't think we'll be able to get to, but we'll reach out and see if we can get those answered offline. But Frank, while I have you for one more minute here, I want to get your 5-year prediction, and then we'll check in 5 years to see how accurate that was.
Oh, a betting man. All right, let's see. It's kind of hard to predict with AI because it's one of those things to where we kind of think of, what is that, Moore's law, where they talk about technology would always double itself every 5 years or whatever it was. I mean, this is really kind of doing it in like weeks. Like every time you turn around 3 weeks from now, it's like we make these astronomical leaps in AI. Like we went from just using ChatGPT last year to now it's like text to video, or they'll capture 15 seconds of your voice and actually be able to create a whole script. So you're seeing this. It's hard to, and in some ways, I'm not trying to hedge my bet here, but it's hard to kind of wrap your head around just how fast things have exploded and escalated, in the sense that, we think about computers and it's just like, yeah, every 5 years there was like this huge leap. Now we're talking about like every 5 weeks, it's like a huge leap. So it's going to be hard to kind of predict. I would say in 5 years, what you're going to probably see is AI tools that are pretty much in everything, that we're going to start taking things for granted because it's just going to be way of life, like the automation piece and being able to auto schedule your things. There's going to probably be a lot more around voice recognition, being able to talk to the AI instead of typing. So what you're going to find is it's voice to chat type of things, to where I'm more like dictating to the AI device, and it's having a conversation with me as if it was a human being back and forth, versus actually producing text-based stuff. So I have a feeling that you're going to see some more humanistic type elements to it. It's going to scare some people because it's going to, is it becoming cognizant? Is it self-learning? I don't think that's going to happen in 5 years, but I do see that what you're going to find is that it's going to be easier to use the AI, because one, it's going to be in everything, but two, I think our interactions with it are going to be more like this. Just talking with Andrew, and Andrew's my AI guy, and we're having a Zoom type conversation, and you're doing all these tasks and things for me as if you were a human being. I think that's where it's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years. I think it's really going to get to the point to where it's going to have more of that human type of interaction, voice, more visual, like it's more humanistic in terms of how it operates.
Yeah, super interesting, and hopeful that comes about. I will be taking my Zoom meeting with my AI assistant from the beach, but no, I'm very, very excited to see what comes about. And thank you again for taking the time.
It'd be great though to kind of have a version of myself that can just get 10 meetings and I don't have to attend. Takes all of the notes, takes everything that I need, and then it just briefs me later. I can have more meetings in a day, which would be great.
Exactly. Yep, back to the productivity thing. That's
right.
awesome. But yeah, thank you again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure hearing from you and talking AI with you. Best of luck on the rest of your speaking tour, and yeah, hopefully we can have you back on in the future.
That sounds great, Andrew. I appreciate having me on. I enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Well, you take care. Have a good one, and thank you everybody for dialing in. Bye bye.